Election cycles bring a lot of anxiety to them. And as I'm recording this video, we're seeing a lot of anxiety, fear, anger really increase because of what's happening in the political cycle as we near an election day. I've talked in some previous of these little videos that's part of a series of looking at psychology and politics about aspects of anxiety, such as how we can manage political anxiety and stress, how this relates to terror management theory. Today, I want to look a little bit at how does anxiety impact our confidence or our certainty in our beliefs. Often anxiety has a connection with what is unknown. And so when things are unknown, sometimes what we do is we look for things that are more concrete, more definitive, because these can help manage the anxiety. But as we do this, it can also distort the reality. Let me give an example that's a little bit more of a distal example at first. This is something that I've observed as a common occurrence at psychology conferences. In the field of psychology, we're often well trained to recognize that psychology, a lot of things are pretty gray. They're not as definitive as they might be in some of the other sciences. There's both advantages and disadvantages with this. But as part of this, what is emphasized is that a lot of social science research doesn't prove things. It doesn't create facts. We have evidence and support for things. So we're trained to avoid using words like proof and facts in most situations and to state things with a little bit more caution. This is in part because in psychology, a lot of things are overdetermined. What I mean by overdetermined is that there's multiple factors contributing to a particular outcome. So, for example, when people experience anxiety, there's often multiple factors that are contributing to that anxiety, not just a single factor. We might notice one that's a little more predominant, but there's normally a number of things that are going on that are contributing to that anxiety. And there's a lot of different pathways to anxiety. It's not just a simple thing that we always know what the cause is. There can be multiple things that are contributing to anxiety. So we have to state things with a little bit more cautious in psychology. Now, what I've observed as a common thing that happens at psychology conferences then is there might be someone presenting their research or presenting their theory, and they start off doing a great job following the particular psychological guidelines, saying things the evidence supports, this is what the research suggests, not presenting it as proofs or facts. But then someone in the audience raises their hand and they offer a different perspective on something, maybe a challenging perspective. And the person all of a sudden shifts from talking about the evidence suggests and speaking in these more cautious terms, saying, well, this is what the research proves. This is what the facts are. The response to kind of the anxiety and being challenged with the anxiety is to state things more definitively. But in doing this, they've just distorted that. Now, this often happens in a lot of political discussions that may start off as dialogues, evolve to debates, and end up at downright arguments. But a lot of these political conversations, as the anxiety creeps in, as the challenges creep in, as the doubts creep in, it may lead us to presenting our views or perspectives with more certainty than what we actually hold. But we also, in the process, might convince ourselves of that. And through this process, we become more polarized. We hold on and we grip these positions as if they're more definitive of what they are. So what we see in some of the research, some of the political psychology and political science research suggests we may not be as divided, at least on some issues in the United States, as what we often think. This is not to minimize that there's very significant differences and there's areas where there's very stark and drastic differences. But there are issues where we're not as divided as what we often think. But because of the anxiety around these political differences, we might present these differences in a way that's much more definitive and much more antagonistic towards other beliefs than what's reality. And we might convince ourselves of these. So what should we do with this then? If we recognize this, what should we do with this? Well, it's good to recognize this process in others, but in particular, it's important to look at it with ourselves. To recognize, when are we looking for proofs? When maybe there's no proof that exists. Maybe it's something that's just subjective and or something that we'll never know. And when that's the case, it's important that we be able to tolerate that anxiety and recognize that that anxiety is pulling us to maybe distort things a little bit, particularly when that distortion may contribute to increasing conflict with other people. It also might affect us in a way where we don't want to listen to different perspectives. And so we cling to people that have similar perspectives, similar to what talked about in a previous one of these videos with terror management theory. And so we might be more critical of different perspectives and and be more confident that they're wrong, and might state that in stronger ways. But when we recognize our tendency in this, that we're doing this, when we recognize us using stronger language than maybe is warranted, we should take this as a sign that we need to sit back, we need to reflect, and we need to look at how might our emotions be contributing to some biases, some distortions in there. This is not to devalue the place of emotions, even in political discourse, because I think it's still important for us to be able to listen to our emotions and hear what they're telling us. But sometimes what our emotions might be telling us is that our anxiety, our fears, our angers, some of these other intense emotions might be causing us to distort how we present issues, how we think about issues, and even our own beliefs about things. And then we can try and move to a perspective where we're willing to listen a little bit more to different perspectives. We're willing to sit with the discomfort of the unknowns. If we can't sit with some of these discomforts, we're going to live a life that has a lot of self-distortion in it. And that is something that's not healthy for us, both within ourselves, with regard to our own mental health, but also in our interactions with others and our interpersonal relationships. It is critical for social and psychological health that we're able to tolerate some of our anxieties about the unknowns. So I hope as you go through this political season and future political seasons that you pay attention to how you may be distorting some things when these different fears start to emerge, and you use that as a sign to become curious about that and to try and manage that in a more responsible manner.